Okay, so tonight, this is a question that came from the DJ community, Ben, and they were wondering about the 900 megahertz microphones. Those are out there, some of the less expensive ones. I mean, I was digging through some of my old microphones. I think I've got a Gemini that was, back in the day was a 900 megahertz. I might even have a Shure that's back there that was 900 megahertz back a million years ago. For those who are wondering about that frequency and such, and why it's not recommended as much today as it was, 15 to 20 years ago. Give us a little elevator speech on that.
Well, I think there's some expensive ones that live there too. There are some higher end Shure models you can buy now that live in the 900 megahertz. But I think if I was to really just put a point on it, it comes down to bandwidth, and 900 megahertz is limited to, and I'm going from memory here, but it's limited to like 10 megahertz. So it's not very wide. That's less than 2 TV channels. Which would be 6 megahertz each. So I don't know that, you're going to put a lot of channels there. And of course, 900 megahertz is one of the ISM bands. So that means there's a lot of stuff that can live there. There's a lot of license-free things that get stuffed in there. And there's a lot of other things that are occupying that space. So we may find ourselves very limited in the number of channels that we could run there. That being said, I don't know that I'd say it's not recommended. I think it's just one of the tools in your arsenal, right? We could look at our traditional lower UHF 470 to 616 as options. And, now we're looking at other solutions. I have reservations about like 2.4, for example. But, we can start looking at those things, deck-based systems, which are up around 1.9. So I think if you have to find a lot of places to put things, maybe you would also use some 900 megahertz. But I don't think, to your point about not being recommended, I don't think it's the first place I'd go.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Do the 900 megahertz those frequencies travel farther than maybe some of the other frequencies that we could use, or do they not quite as far? What are the tendencies with a 900 megahertz frequency?
It's going to be really similar. When we're talking about, really technically even 2.4 is considered part of UHF, although we tend to carve that out, and we tend to carve out 900 megahertz again as ISM bands. But when we're talking about wavelength and propagation and penetration, and we're talking about the difference between a 500, 600 megahertz wave, something in the high 500s, and 900 megahertz. It obviously, is half the wavelength. So that's a notable difference, but it's not such that it's going to be severely disadvantageous, and what I mean by that is longer wavelengths actually will penetrate more. So, we get into these lower wavelengths. It's one of the reasons that they really liked like 600 and 700 megahertz for rural cellular, that sort of thing, is these wavelengths really do a pretty good job of penetrating and propagating over distance. But now, of course, there's engineering is a series of trade-offs, and that's why you're starting to see these microcells in big cities being way up there at like 25 gigahertz, really tight, small wavelengths, a lot of data bandwidth, but very, very short range, and they don't penetrate very well. And that's okay in a big city because you're only talking a few blocks. And I realize the question was on 900 megahertz, and we just kind of took a little romp through the electromagnetic spectrum, but
it's all part of the story.
It's all part of the story, exactly.
Interesting. Okay, I did not know. I kind of assumed as I saw the post that somebody put up that it was really frowned upon completely across the board. But as it's sounding is that there are going to be some instances where it could be a functional tool in our arsenal.
Yeah, when you got to start putting a lot of frequencies out there and you start to run out of space, if you're in a really crowded market like Chicago or Atlanta and you've got a lot of RF channels to find homes for, we might have to look at some of these things. Now, of course, all the rules changed. Something that has kind of been in development for a few years, and it's kind of been an open secret, if you will. I think a lot of us knew about it, and yet there were other people who went, oh my gosh, like they didn't see this train coming, is like the new WiMAS systems, which, and legislation changed a few years ago to allow for this. We start talking about really, really wide systems that are both uplink and downlink. So your same system could be an IEM or a mic or whatever. Now, these systems right now are very, very expensive. We're looking at, $20,000-$30,000. But undoubtedly, I think that's the future. That's what we're going to see start to, precipitate down. And it might be 15 or 20 years before it gets to the portable market. But that's clearly where that shift is happening in terms of how we transmit audio in either direction. But anyway, yeah, so back to, 900 megahertz. If you've got a find homes for everything, and you're not running WiMAS, now that we should just make no mistake here, right? Comparing a 900 megahertz, high-end Shure digital system to a Gemini 900 megahertz, those are apples and grapefruit, right? That's sure. Not, they're not the same, right?
Yeah, so. Yeah, and these were the ones that I was referring to were something I bought 20 some years ago, I believe, maybe even a little farther. It was one of my first trips to Las Vegas, so that tells you how long ago that was. But at the time, that's
well, I wouldn't recommend using that system now or probably then. But
yeah. Yep, that was just what we picked up back then. So great, wonderful. Let's move on to our next. Let's look at the photo of the week, Ben. If you want to pull that up.